Arlington Cemetery is the biggest cemetery in the nation. Arlington has 13 miles of road and 3 miles of walkways. Many important figures of history have been buried there, such as William Taft and Abe Lincoln's son. It is home to 2,111 graves from the Battle of Bull Run in the Civil War. It also has graves for the entire Continental Army of George Washington during the Revolution. Although offered by Lincoln to command the Union Army, Robert E. Lee opposed the war. However, he decided to command the Confederate Army as Virginia seceded from the Union. It was founded officially in 1866 and owned by the Lees until 1861. Mrs. Lee could not pay her taxes to keep the property, so the U.S. purchased it from her for $96.02. However, they sued over this, and the U.S. repurchased it in 1883 for $150,000. The Lees never returned to Arlington. General Montgomery Meigs was close friends with Lee, but felt betrayed by him after he decided to command the Confederate Army. When asked to survey for a proper cemetery location in Washington, he only surveyed Arlington. Arlington had a view of the Capitol, and it was the first strategic position after crossing the Potomac for the Army. By 1864, the death toll on the property was huge. The dead was carelessly buried at the site. The first soldier was buried on May 13, 1864, and his name was Private William Christman. Each branch of the cemetery has a different type of ceremony for funerals. The flags are always draped over the caskets. There are nearly 28 burials each day and 6,900 a year. 3,800 former slaves are buried in Section 27 of the cemetery. Pointed headstones became standard symbols for the Confederate graves. 1866, the first memorial was dedicated to 2,111 unknown soldiers from Bull Run, both Union and Confederate. It used to be a 1,100-acre plantation. However, the cemetery is 624 acres. It is located west of Washington, D.C., across the Potomac River. An influential person buried there was named Fred Beale. He was a member of the 10th Cavalry of the state of Mississippi. It was called the Partisan Cavalry. He was with General Joseph E. Johnston and his army when they surrendered in April 1865 and fled south. A poem by Robert Hazel describes the horrors of Arlington Cemetery as it came to be.
General Robert E. Lee participated in the Civil War on the Confederate side. He was born on January 19, 1807, and died October 12, 1870. He was born to his Revolutionary War hero father, Henry Light Horse Harry Lee, in Stratford Hall, Virginia. He graduated second in his class in 1829 at West Point Academy in Virginia. Robert E. Lee married a descendant of George Washington's adopted son. Her name was Mary Anna Randolph Custis. Before seeing any action, Lee served 17 years in the Corps of Engineers, supervising and inspecting the construction of the nation's coastal defenses. Mary Anna Randolph Custis Lee was born on October 1, 1808, and was the only surviving child of George Washington Parke Custis and Mary Lee Custis. Robert and Mary met when they were very young, when Robert would come to the Arlington house to visit with his family. When she was a teen, she had numerous suitors, but her heart was set on Robert and accepted his marriage proposal in the summer of 1830. Robert and Mary married at the family parlor at Arlington House on June 30, 1831, and had 7 children. 6 of those children were born in the dressing room that adjoined to the Lee's bedroom, according to family tradition. Mary was an artist just like her father and painted delicate landscapes. She also took place after her mother and was an avid gardener. Her favorite flower was the rose, and Mary produced 11 different varieties in her flower garden at Arlington House. She was extremely well educated, versed in both Greek and Latin, and often talked politics with her father and husband. Following in her mother's footsteps once again, Mary Lee taught slave women in Arlington to sew, read, and write, advocating the idea of eventual emancipation. She wanted to be sure that all enslaved people would be able to support themselves after they gained their freedom. During Mary's adult life, she developed rheumatoid arthritis and became increasingly debilitated as she grew older. At the end of 1861, Mary was confined to a wheelchair. When Robert E. Lee resigned from the U.S. Army on April 22, 1861, he begged Mary to evacuate Arlington House, and she obliged on May 15, 1861, having delayed the process for as long as she could. Mary Lee, Robert's wife, had to abandon Arlington the 1,100-acre estate she had inherited from her father, George Washington Parke Custis, upon his death in 1857. Although being in pain almost every moment of the day, Mary worked hard to support her family and husband throughout the war. She and her daughters knitted socks by the hundreds to be distributed to the Confederate men by her husband.